Today on Scouting for Growth, we are thrilled to welcome Charlie Wendland, Chief Claims Officer at Branch Insurance. Charlie is a recognized leader in claims transformation, having built Branch's claims organization from the ground up and championed the use of technology and artificial intelligence to drive efficiency, scale, and customer centricity. With over 20 years of experience in the industry, Charlie has become a go-to voice on how to blend digital innovation and the irreplaceable human touch. At Branch, he has led initiatives that have transformed, I would say, the organization, automated administrative tasks, streamlined workflows, and empowered adjusters to focus on what matters most: delivering empathetic, high-quality service to policyholders. The world of claims management is undergoing a seismic shift. Artificial intelligence is now at the heart of this transformation. Insurers leveraging AI have reported up to a 75% reduction in claims handling time and a 50% increase in fraud detection accuracy. Automating with technology such as robotic process automation are cutting claims processing times by as much as 40%, freeing adjusters to focus on complex decision and customer care. Meanwhile, the adoption of mobile apps and self-service portals is giving policyholders real-time access to updates and direct communication, fundamentally enhancing the customer experience and engagement. But as Charlie will tell us, technology is only part of the story. The future of claims is about continuous transformation, balancing innovation with compliance, and ensuring that as we automate, we don't lose sight of empathy and trust. With experienced adjusters retiring and new talent entering the workforce, the challenge is not just about adopting new tools, but about building a culture that delivers technical expertise with strategic thinking and human values. Charlie, welcome to the show. We are excited to dive into your journey, your vision for the future of claims, and the lesson you have learned leading the transformation at Branch Insurance. Hi, Charlie. Thank you so much for joining me on Scouting for Growth today.
Hi, Sabine. Thank you for having me. Really excited to talk to you today.
So, Charlie, before we dive into claims transformation, right, which is your topic and has been your topic for a very long time, can you share a little bit with us your journey into Branch and what got you into the insurance industry?
Sure. Well, I'll start with what got me into the industry. So I've been in the industry for over 20 years. And when I graduated, I was looking for, various jobs, right? I was not looking just in insurance. I just needed a job. And I live in Cleveland, and which is the home of Progressive Insurance. And so I went on to Progressive's website, and they had an explainer video about claims adjusting and what a claims adjuster does. And it was this really cool animation showing the claims adjuster responding to an accident and investigating. And I really thought that that combination of the investigation, the problem solving, and most importantly, being there for people during their worst moments, it felt both intellectually engaging and genuinely meaningful. And so that really drew that to me to where I applied. And then a few months later, they had called me, and then I was kind of off and running, and learned a ton during my time at Progressive and everywhere I've been since Progressive. Which leads up to Branch. And so I've been at Branch for over 6 years. I was here pre-revenue. And so what really drew me to Branch, aside from the opportunity to create something from nothing, but to work with really smart people who are passionate about what they do and really want to make a difference. And so joining Branch has been a wonderful experience. I've learned a ton working with just a great team, as I said, who are really passionate about what they do. And it feels like we're just making each other better through that passion. So it's just been a wonderful experience today.
Yes, I remember many years back when I discovered Branch and you became a unicorn. I actually wrote a little post, and your team was so kind to actually say thank you, Sabine, on LinkedIn. So I was very, really pleased. And I've met since your team in Ohio, in Columbus, and I can vouch it's actually a really awesome team. Still young when you think about the company age, right? And so when you look at your work, Charlie, what were the biggest challenges you faced in building a claims organization from scratch? And how did you prioritize what needed to be done
Yeah,
first?
well, it was just that. It was building a claims organization from scratch. As I mentioned, so I joined pre-revenue, and when we first started, we were relying exclusively on third parties to handle our claims because what little capital we had, we wanted to focus on growing the business and not outfitting a fully, fleshed out claims organization. And so I had built some framework around that. How would we manage our partners to deliver the kind of customer experience that we wanted our customers, our members, to have, despite not having total control over it because we didn't have our team. We always knew, though, in the long run, that wasn't where we were going. And so we built our claims organization and launched internally in early 2022. Um, the hardest part about that was trying to, and I'll back up for a second because I think it's useful context. Branch's unique selling proposition is the ease of acquiring a bundle for home and auto insurance. We just ask for someone's name and address, and then we are able to bundle their home and auto. Where you compare that with other carriers, and you are into an application for 45 minutes to an hour, having to answer a lot of questions you may not know, like what is your car's VIN? So it's a frictionless experience. And so how do we replicate that on the back end when where the rubber meets the road, right? The claims part of it. And so we are relentlessly focused on that customer experience to try to remove the friction from the claims process, but still being very principled in our approach. We're not going to sacrifice, quality or compliance for speed.
Mhm.
Um, but really, the question we asked ourselves is how do we optimize for customer experience while achieving best in class claims outcomes, despite our size? We were never going to use that as an excuse. And so what we realized is that those two initiatives were so closely tied together. So, for instance, when you think about cycle time, this is a mutually beneficial goal. It benefits the customer because we are putting them back into the condition they were prior to the loss. And then obviously it benefits the carrier because it's closing the claim, as fast as you can while making sure you still have a really sound investigation and paying what you owe. And so we are small. And as I mentioned, we could not afford to build a fully fleshed out claims organization. And so we made strategic investments to automate those administrative tasks that typically weigh down our adjusters and erode loss outcomes and also driving expense inefficiencies. And so we listened to our adjusters. We did a lot of time studies on what was bogging them down, and we proactively sought out those inefficient processes and we looked for technology to improve them because our philosophy around the use of technology is find those administrative tasks that weigh down your adjusters, free them of those through that technology, and then they can spend more time on complex issues and customer care. And that was really the principle that continues to drive us today, but one that we identified very early when we built the claims organization.
So I want to dive a little bit more around the technology point you just made, right? Small organization, small team, you have to balance internal best practices and around how you apply technology internally, and then you're actually working with a lot of partners as part of the ecosystem you're building at Branch. So how did you ensure that your team, now I'm talking about leadership and culture, right?
Yeah.
How did you ensure that your team remains open-minded, right, to change and automation, and that it didn't negatively impact them and the customer support and the customer services you were planning to deliver based on your unique value proposition?
It's the hardest part and most critical part of this implementation of technology, right? Is making sure that the team that will be leveraging it is bought in. It's really hard. And we've been on a journey with it, but we have found to what is the most impactful is making sure they're part of the design and testing. You know, we're still small enough where we have adjusters, we get adjusters' opinions on everything that we do for the most part, which can sound inefficient, but it's really not because we do it in a very thoughtful way. But we have them be part of the alpha and beta testing with a lot of these products so they understand the why about what we're doing and to hear their feedback about, oh, you know, this is great or this could be a little bit better here. And then we're able to make those tweaks because of our size and we still are agile enough where we can change it based on that feedback. And so bringing them along for that journey rather than just dropping that finished product on them has really enabled us to make changes and make them often. And we do. For as young as we are, we have taken such an iterative approach to everything that we've built, understanding that it's not going to be perfect when we first launch, but we're going to be really sensitive to what is not perfect and seek perfection, even though we know that's not, you know, possible.
Yeah. So what were some of the hurdles you experienced, right? And you actually encountered when you started automating because you had to actually probably test and learn, iterate to make sure that you will serve your customer. So how did you overcome that and how you made those choices?
Yeah, you know, the hurdles that we had were all internal. You know, what we have found is that our customers have been quick to adopt a lot of the technology we've put in place. And as I say that, there's really only one main one that we currently have with the use of AI that is customer facing. That's our first notice of loss. 70% of our first notice of loss now is either done electronically or through a voice AI, you know, and so which is 30% go to humans. And that number continues to shrink, by the way. And so that was a surprisingly fast adoption because I was a skeptic about voice AI because historically, if I were to call somewhere where I'm a customer and I sense there is an AI on the other end of the phone, I'm like shouting human into the phone.
Yeah.
And so I came in quite skeptical, but was willing to listen. And the technology that we're using is really impressive. It is empathetic, which was another part of the process I was worried about replacing is, you know, when you take humans out of the loop for first notice of loss, for instance, how do you recreate that empathy? The voice AI is surprisingly empathetic. It issues empathetic statements based on the answers it received. It's quite good, and that's not just our opinion. We measure customer sentiment and call smoothness through that voice AI journey. And we're able to identify trouble spots throughout the journey and then optimize it from there. So that's been a big win. But as far as the hurdles internally, it's really only happened when we, and when I say we, I mean my leadership team and me, have done not the best job of explaining the why about what we're doing. Generally, when we take the time as part of that change management process to explain why we're doing the thing we're doing, our team has been very open to that. And as I said, especially with the startup, change is ever present because we're trying to find a better way to do something and we're able to change quite quickly. But what we have found is the hurdles are all self-inflicted. So if we're not communicating effectively, well, that's on us, you know, and shame on us if we're not doing that and explaining the why appropriately for as fast as we're making these changes.
So let's talk about scaling, right? 200 people still, you know, I mean, I still think it's small, but because you can use the latest technology is probably as efficient and as, you know, fast growing as some of the legacy companies we see out there. So how do you balance that need for speed and scaling with the responsibility to maintain quality and compliance within the organization?
We will not sacrifice quality and compliance. Before we even started handling claims, two of our first few hires was a head of QA and a head of compliance because we know how critical that is to the claims part of it. And so we were not going to just kind of throw caution to the wind about this. We want to make sure that we are still a principled claims operation that does things correctly while still leveraging technology to give our humans more capacity and greater efficiency of their job. But what you said about a scaling organization, it's what it's all about. When we are implementing this technology, it is so we can scale in an efficient manner. So we can keep our headcount lower than it would be without that technology, right? So we can scale in a very efficient way. We create capacity for our team so they can focus more on complex issues and customer care. And that's the entire philosophy about how we've thought about the integration and investment of technology into branch claims.
So you already touched upon empathy with, when you talk about voice. And so let's dive into technology, the power of artificial intelligence and the human touch, because all the conversation we're hearing right now is about artificial intelligence, but also how we drive empathy while using AI. So can you walk us through a specific example or many examples as to how you use artificial intelligence within branch, how you automate and you drive measurable outcomes for the business and in claims processing in particular, whilst automating processing and coverages?
Sure. So we are very sensitive about our use of technology as it relates to customer facing. As I mentioned, we're not going to sacrifice the customer experience just so we can, gain some kind of expense efficiency through the use of that tech. And so the way that we have created the framework around the use of technology at branch, specifically with AI, has pretty much been all the adjuster experience. And what I mean by that is three big ways we're using AI right now. The first is our back office, so our mailroom. 85% of our mail is automatically routed by AI to the claim file, which means we're just handling mail through exception. So we don't have a giant support staff, scanning mail and distributing it. That's all done through OCR. As I mentioned, our first notice of loss is majority of that is powered through an AI and the voice AI and then the electronic first notice of loss. And everything is automated. So as that data is collected through the first notice of loss process, it's then through an API call, set up a claim within our claims management system, and then automatically assigned to an adjuster based on the claim type. And so when you think about everything I'm describing so far, administrative. So the third part that we're using AI, specifically large language models, is document generation. We found an opportunity as it relates to the authoring of coverage letters, specifically reservation of rights and declination letters. First of all, it takes a long time for humans to draft those, depending on the type of letter. The second is it's inconsistent in its quality because, from human to human, you are inconsistent, and that's just human nature. And it doesn't matter how well we try to templatize that. With those types of letters, templates hardly ever work. And so we were spending about 10 hours per human either authoring or approving those letters per week. And so we created a product with a strong vendor partner of ours that uses LLM to author those same letters. And it will reference the specific policy, and it'll generate 2 drafts of a letter within like 2 minutes of the prompt. And when I say prompt, you think about ChatGPT, and you would issue a prompt to say, please write. Well, I don't know if you're supposed to say please. I think that burns off some energy.
You know what? I would say please and thank you, because you don't know when the robots are going to come.
Well, yeah, that's exactly where I'm going. So I'm very polite to the AI, but nevertheless, author a coverage letter for reservation of rights for lack of cooperation. And then it generates 2 versions of that letter. We pick the one that is most accurate because we're training the model as we're developing this. And then we can still edit the letter. So we still have the human in the loop there, but that administrative work of authoring the draft of the letter is now done by the AI. So that 10 hours a week has now gone down to about 2 hours a week. And we have greater consistency in our letters. All the relevant fraud language is built in because it is integrated within our tech stack for claims. So it's pulling in the right policy, it's pulling in all the relevant claim information. And so that's just been such a huge win. And so all of these things translate to a better customer experience because we are unburdening our claims team of all these administrative functions. And the one clear point that I am pointing to demonstrate this is our NPS. So from 2024, when we put in a lot of this technology, to 2025 to date, year over year, we're about 20 points better in our NPS score. Now, that's not all technology, but because you can't draw strong correlations, right, to any one thing. But my opinion on this is it's contributing to it in a major way, although you can't identify it purely by, the number.
Well, you talked about knowledge industry, bringing back people to knowledge work, right? And
That's right.
so getting them to focus on much more complex tasks, using the brain in a powerful way to solve problems and let the technology to operate where it needs to serve the customer as best as possible. But I know we've been on many panel discussions together, and you have spoken about the power of keeping the human in the loop. And so I would love for you to explain, what does it mean when you start looking at claims processing, when you actually start balancing that human-driven processing versus that automation?
Yeah, it's we are always going to have a human in the loop, certainly for anything that has a deterministic quality. We think AI is really good at data intake and summarization.
Mhm.
We are not going to have AI make coverage decisions, nor are we going to have it make liability decisions or what we are going to pay on the claim. But we will continue to make investments to help our adjusters be better at their job, to be more accurate, and to allow them to spend more time on those complex issues so we can get more accurate loss outcomes and heighten the customer experience. And so we think about technology as an assistant for our human claims team, and allow them to focus on what they're good at, which is that going back to the empathy piece and investigation. We have yet to find technology to be suitable for that. We also think we will eventually get some regulatory guidance about this as well, that we'll have humans as the final decision maker, which we totally agree with and fits into our philosophy. And so human in the loop, it's really like the human is still responsible for the entire process, but is assisted by all of this technology that we've put in place for them.
So Branch is a highly technology-driven organization. And so when I look at the transformation we are going through, we are in 2025 and the years move so fast. We are talking about the AI-powered insurer, but we also are talking about the data first insurer. So how do you ensure that all the influx of data you're receiving all the time actually allow you or enable you to be operationally efficient when you think about the fact that you need to get data from IoT devices, maybe from telematics devices and other data sources?
We need to find data that is operational. And what I mean by that is we use telematics in our insurance product, but it's optional, which means when someone has an accident, we may not have the telematics to give us the data about what happened in that loss. So it's really hard to operationalize. And we're not going to create processes through exception. However, we are keeping a close eye on how this is evolving. So specifically for auto claims, my strong belief is that within like 5 or 10 years, with the proliferation of cameras and vehicles that will start recording, as well as all the data we are able to obtain from the airbag control module without plugging into it and having it downloaded by an engineer. Once we have those two things, it dynamically changes the landscape of the claims organizations, where we are going to move from claims investigation to claims confirmation, because all of that data from the telematics as well as the vehicle itself will be in the adjuster's hands. So that first call to the insured is no longer, tell me what happened in the accident. It's now, it looked like you were traveling down this street at this speed and you came to this intersection and that's where the impact occurred. Do I have that right? So that feels really good from a customer experience perspective. And when you talk about cycle time, think about the investigation cycle time has shrunk dramatically because you have the video, you have all that data in the palm of your hands. And so when we have that, which again, I think will probably be in 5 to 10 years. And what's going to be a more interesting conversation is how will we get access? Where will we get access to this data and video from? When that occurs, then we're talking about a dynamic shift in claims operations and how they operate.
So, looking at the technology landscape, which is around us, and you already mentioned some key technology you're observing, what do you think are going to be the most influential or the most important technology for you at Branch over the next few years?
I think we will continue to make investments in AI that will enable our team to be better at their job, which is a very like vague, like almost platitudinal statements. But I think about the same use of that AI that is customer facing. So, for instance, the two biggest complaints that I've heard throughout my career from customers has been, I don't know what's happening with my claim and my adjuster's not calling me back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason why the second one is not happening is because that adjuster is probably bogged down and just putting out fires because their inventories are too high and their phone is ringing off the hook. If we were able to implement an AI that is customer facing, that could provide those same status updates to the customer, to relieve the adjuster of having to do that and giving the member what they deserve, the customer what they deserve, which is proactive status updates based upon completion of milestones in the claims process, that not only makes a much better customer experience, but again, it's another thing that you are relieving your adjuster on so they have more capacity to focus on those complex issues to get better outcomes. And you're improving the customer experience because you have solved the biggest issue, again, in my own experience, which is keeping the customer in the loop, setting expectations, and then meeting them.
Yeah. So I would like to dive now into the future of work, workforce transformation, culture, which are such big topic right now when we think about the fact that all the conversation we are having is around artificial intelligence, the hype around it, and the fact that, now we have tools in the business, within the business audience that we didn't have 2 years ago. So when you look at your team, and I'm trying to inspire other leaders out there, Charlie, what strategy have you found as being the most effective to build culture that, allow all technical teams and business teams to work together and actually drive that transformation forward, that digital transformation forward, as we are all now becoming far and far more digital businesses?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love this question. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again briefly. When I first started at Branch, we were pre-revenue, and so we have yet to sell a policy. And we were at an off-site meeting, and there was like 5 of us, and we spent half a day talking about culture. And I was looking around the table, thinking to myself, like, we don't even have a company. This seems like a giant waste of time. We need to focus on like, how are we going to grow this business? But in hindsight, I was wrong, because that investment in talking about culture at that point in our life has enabled us to grow to the scale that we are today and to allow our team to embrace the changes we've made. All of this change management is really interwoven within our organization. And so the way that I think about it, what we've done specifically in claims, three pillars. The first is we anchor the technical expertise and business outcomes. And so what I mean by that is we've seen our technical claim staff thrive when we connect their expertise to the larger picture, whether that's loss ratio, customer experience, et cetera. So it's not just handling claims. We want them to understand their impact that they are having on the business. And we're still small enough to where we can really drive that home. The second one is we have built cross-functional exposure. And so we make our leaders sit at the same table as product, underwriting, actuarial, and that exposure pushes them to think about the trade-offs that we're making beyond the claim file. And so by doing that, we have found that this has normalized the strategic dialogue as part of the technical decision-making process. And then the last one was, we talked about the change management and how it's ever present. So we use those transformational initiatives as teaching grounds. And so every major change we've made has been a chance to coach our teams about the how, so the technical piece of that, and then also the why, so the strategic part. And so when we embed our staff in the project work, as I said, we bring them along for the ride. It allows them to practice translating their expertise into those strategic outcomes. And that's worked really well for us.
Yeah, no, it's very inspiring because when we start thinking about the future of our industry, we need more of this, right? To actually find the right balance between people and technology and inspire, the claims expert to actually come to the industry and stay in the industry. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a claims executive sharing with me that most of his claim staff is 1 to 4 year old in claims. And so now finding the right balance with expertise means he has to use technology. But as you said, training, getting the right skill within the team also allow people to want to stay longer within the industry, but also feel excited that we are empowering them with really cool technology to enable them to deal with more complexity and get into the next job, which I think when you start looking at social inflation and the litigation aspect of things in the United States, it is critical to have this expertise in the team.
I totally agree. There's this interesting inflection point right now where we have a lot of deep knowledge leaving the industry. And all of this, as you said, very young tenure entering. And so if we are not very thoughtful and spend the time in giving them the training they need, there's going to be a huge knowledge gap. And so it's worth the time that you're spent to make sure you're getting those early career folks off on the right foot and will heighten the chances that you retain them for the long term.
So, Charlie, honored to speak with you on the Scouting for Growth podcast and really adore the branch team. It was amazing to meet you in Ohio, Columbus. I discovered the city actually for the first time when I came to Insurers Scout and I met the whole team. But one key thing I would like you to dive into is when we look at the next phase of claim innovation and claim transformation within branch, but within our industry, right? What do you think the customer expectation is about? We want this Amazon and Netflix experience. How can we do this in insurance? And I'm talking here to the incumbents who are actually finding it hard often to get it done.
Yeah, I think seek opportunities to delight your customers. What I've noticed is there's always been a lot of talk about the reason we're not going to do something is our customers won't like it. Well, how do you know that? Have you done any kind of surveying? Have you spoke to them? We did a lot of that early on. We did polling of our own customers about certain types of technology to see whether or not they would be amenable to those. Until you're able to, speak with the customer. And by the way, you have internal customers too, and that's your claims team.
Yeah.
So understand what is bogging them down as well. Do you have advocacy committees set up where you are hearing the voice of the adjuster? Only then can you really articulate a problem and make sure that that problem is one that's worth solving. There are some problems that are relatively minor and cannot be cured with technology, right? And so I hate even to refer to those as problems, but make sure that you have a problem that is worth solving and can be solved with technology to where your customers will accept them. I have seen that there is some tendency to implement technology for the sake of technology. And my experience has always been, well, that's bad technology. So make sure that there is a problem that is worth solving and that technology is the right answer to do that. And so to answer your question very specifically, it varies organization to organization, right? But you have to be very thoughtful about the approach. And it's worth the time spent understanding the problem through like grassroots efforts, speaking with the customer, both internally and externally.
Charlie, being myself in this venture clienting environment where my whole purpose is to accelerate the ability for carriers, but the more mature insurance company to work with the younger insurance company. So it's all about digital transformation, but also building digital ecosystem and collaboration. I believe in test and learn, iterative implementation, smaller projects so that we can test and actually see the results rather than going for big transformation initiatives. So when you start looking at moving from incremental improvement to true transformation, right? Getting things that stick and that enable the business to scale and grow, but also that for the people to want to stay and be part of that transformation. What advice would you offer to organization trying to place artificial intelligence at the heart of their claims processing when they need to think about compliance, governance, and customer trust?
My advice would be very similar to, what we were just talking about is what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And also, what's the North Star, right? So like what is your overall goal with all this? Is it to heighten the customer experience? Is it to become more efficient? You would need to ensure that the compliance and quality is not sacrificed, regardless of what you do. Because when you do that, obviously there are issues that I don't need to discuss, but it erodes the customer experience. And so if it is technology that is not going to improve either compliance or the quality of the experience, I would ask yourselves whether or not it's worth doing and why would you even consider doing it in the first place? Because to me, most of your problems will certainly stem around the quality piece, right? Like there's something that you are doing right now that you are having suboptimal outcomes, right? That your quality is suffering. Is technology the right solution? Should it be homegrown? Or is there a third party partner that you can use to help you solve this problem? But it always goes back to make sure you are able to articulate the problem. Is that problem tied to compliance? Is it tied to quality? Because there's different strategies that you need to take depending on what that problem is. And so make sure that it's a problem before you start solving.
Yeah, make sure that it is a problem before you start solving it. Beautiful word. So, Charlie, for our listeners who may want to reach out to you, maybe learn a little bit more about Branch, what would be the best way for them to do so?
If you'd like to learn more about Branch, you can find out more about us at branch.com. I am available on LinkedIn. That is my only social platform. And it's Charlie Wendland. Just search for me. You'll be able to find me.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining me on Scouting for Growth. And I cannot wait to see you probably in November this year.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you either. And Sabine, thank you. This was so enjoyable and an honor to be with you. So thanks for making the time.
My pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them, and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also, connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.